Well, hey guys, today we're going to talk about the beginning of Standard 2, which has to do with westward expansion. You should understand a little bit more about how it gets off the ground and why we start moving west by the time that we are done. I want to introduce you to a concept. This is a concept that a lot of people in the 1800s hold to. It's a concept called manifest destiny. And I'm not going to read that to you. It's not something you have to memorize. But manifest destiny is going to be this idea that the United States, even though at the time that the term is coined, pretty much only occupies this chunk primarily of the country, people start to look westward and they realize that there are these wide open spaces, and maybe that space should be ours. Maybe it's designed for people just like us. And so you're going to start to see paintings like this one that symbolize the idea of manifest destiny. The idea that America is spreading west and we are bringing with us light, right? That's why on the left it's dark and on the right it's bright. We are moving and we're heading in, well, we're bringing the light with us. You see the angel there. The idea is that we're led there by providence or by God, and we're bringing advancement like the railroad and like farming and like that woman has telegraph wire in her hand. So manifest destiny is this term in the 1800s that describes this belief that God obviously wants Americans to stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific, okay? That obviously we should control it all. Now, this is a big deal because there are people who live west of us. There are the Native Americans, there are Mexicans, okay? Those are the primary groups. And we're going to start to say, yeah, but it's for us. Well, how do we know that it's for us? And us in this case being those white Americans way back when. What they would say is, well, look how far we've gone west already. Clearly, we're here because we have the blessing of God as we move. So let's see what happens as we continue to move west. Obviously, we should go more. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, Thomas Jefferson is one of the guys who really contributes to this. Jefferson is elected in 1800. He's the third president, and he brings with him this idea of Jeffersonian democracy. Jeffersonian democracy is a couple things. You can see there that he's going to bring his democratic Republican idea of let's bring power back to the states. Let's take it away from the federal government like the Federalists had been doing for years. Let's put it back in the hands of the states. And in his mind, if we can grow the country, that would be great because now we'll have even more states, which means the federal government can't possibly control it all. We have to leave power in the hands of the people and the states. He also believes the government needs to be looking out for the farmers because they're the backbone of the country. And you're going to see this in a decision he makes. Thomas Jefferson decides that the federal government needs to help farmers get access to the Mississippi River. Just think about this. Okay, the Mississippi is out west. Let me show you exactly where it is. Here's the Mississippi. It comes down. Oh, you're not seeing it. There we go. It comes down right here. And the Mississippi River ends in New Orleans. He wants people who are out west, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, to be able to take their crops to the Mississippi River. Sorry, that's kind of shaky, isn't it? And to head down and out New Orleans and the Gulf of Mexico as they move toward trading with Europe. Sorry if I just made you motion sick. Okay. So he says we need control over this. So he sends a delegation of representatives to France to try to make a deal with France because they control that land out west. France is currently under the control of a guy named Napoleon, who you've probably heard of. Napoleon is busy trying to take over all of Europe, and Britain keeps stopping him. And so Napoleon is like, you guys have come at a great time. I need some cash to fight England. You guys have cash. I've got land. Let's make a deal. Napoleon says, you give me $15 million and I will give you New Orleans and trade rights along the Mississippi. And how about if I just throw in all the land that we have in the New World? We'll just give all of it to you. Guys, this is massive because this is going to double the size of the country. Okay. The orange and the blue is what we had prior to the Louisiana Purchase. This deal for $15 million, that works out to about 3 cents an acre, is going to double the size of the country. That's huge. There's only one problem. Remember, Jefferson is a Democratic Republican, and they believe that we should interpret the Constitution strictly. We shouldn't do anything that it doesn't specifically give us the power to do. Well, guess what the Constitution doesn't give Jefferson the power to do? doesn't give him the power to add all this land. He was just trying to make a treaty, and now he has this massive deal fall in his lap. Guys, this deal in his mind is going to do exactly what he thinks we need to do. More land so we can help out the farmers. We can spread out the government's power so no one group ever gets too much. This is Jeffersonian democracy in a nutshell. So he kind of says, I don't really care. To do it, he has to interpret the Constitution loosely, which is very much against his nature. But he says, it's what I got to do. It's for the best. This is the Louisiana Purchase. Now, up until this point, we've really been focusing on trying to build a relationship with Europe, trying to kind of hang with the big boys. But three things are going to happen along with the Louisiana Purchase that make us say, maybe we ought to look westward. Maybe we ought to see what's out there, like that picture I showed you. The first thing is actually something that happened before Jefferson was even president. When George Washington's about to leave the presidency, he issues something called his farewell address. And he says a number of things about, like, it's kind of like his words of wisdom to the country. One of the things he says is the United States needs to avoid entangling alliances with other countries. In other words, don't get messed up in other people's junk and other people's business. It's just going to complicate things. You're going to get sucked into like wars you don't want to get sucked into. It's going to be bad. And everybody's like, all right, that seems like a deal. We'll come back to this one later. So Jefferson, when he's president, tries to live it out. France and England are kind of perpetually at war, and so Jefferson issues an embargo where he says, let's stop trading so much with England and France. Instead, let's work on building up our own inter-country trade. In other words, from the south to the north, and from the west to the north, and so on and so forth. Why don't we build up our own country instead of messing so much with Europe and France? I'm not going to explain all the embargo stuff like I did in class. I'll just point out this political cartoon, Oh, This Cursed Oh Grab Me. Oh Grab Me is actually embargo backwards, which is, he's just complaining about the embargo there. The third thing is that after Jefferson's embargo, we start trading again, and it doesn't go so well. The British, because they're at war with the French, pass a law that says any ship that's going to Europe has to stop in England and pay them taxes first. And we don't like that. And England starts stopping our ships and taking men off of our ships and forcing them to sail for England's navy because they're in the middle of a war. And we are not into that at all. And so we end up in the War of 1812. And some stuff goes down, like the picture there. The British land in Washington, D.C., and they burn down the White House. Legit, like that really happened. We try to take over Canada unsuccessfully, try to add them into the United States, and they're like, pass. The outcome of the War of 1812, it's kind of a draw. No one side really has a huge major victory that ends it, although we have the Battle of New Orleans, which you might have heard of. That happens after the war is already over. It's a weird thing. Before I get to the point, one other thing that comes out of the War of 1812 is that Alexander Hamilton's party, the Federalists, they don't support the war. They say this is kind of a mess. We don't want to get dragged into this. And people see them as unpatriotic. So they stop voting for the Federalists and they just kind of die. They're not really a party anymore. So the end of all this is that we stop messing with Europe and we start focusing on what's in our backyard. Let's go westward. And one of the immediate changes to this is something, I know this seems like I'm probably jumping here, but there's a huge immediate change. People buy land in the West for like pennies, and that changes American culture fundamentally. Because now more people own land, and you're like, yeah, but you might not realize when the Constitution is written, the only people who can vote are white men who own land. Well, guess what? Now, anybody with a couple bucks can own a piece of land out west. So before, the idea was we only want wealthy people who own property and have some strong say in this to be able to vote. Now, anybody can. Even if you're just a farmer who's never gone to school, you can own a piece of land in the old Louisiana territory, and you can get this. It's going to be fine. Guys, this is huge. Because they're going to drop, it's so easy to own land, they're going to drop the property ownership requirement to vote. Anybody, as long as they are white and male, can vote. I know. Little by little, we got to take what we can get when we can, okay? Um, you might say, what if I'm black and I own land? Well, actually, the laws are written so that African Americans are specifically disenfranchised. So that means we specifically keep African Americans from voting, even if they own land. Yes, there is definitely some racism happening there. There is no question. But this change in politics is going to start drawing in the common man. We actually call this the era of the common man. Voting, debates, discussions about politics becomes kind of a national pastime. You see here now this guy over on the left in the white jacket has gone to some small village to talk to these people about why they should vote for him. The common man now gets a say, and the common man in 1828 is going to elect a guy named Andrew Jackson, who's a war hero from the War of 1812. He's super popular. Everybody loves him because they've read books about him and articles and all kinds of stuff. Andrew Jackson he's an interesting dude, okay? He's the first guy from the West. We call it the West because he's only from Tennessee, but that's as far as the country really, sorry, it's the westernmost state is what I should say. He's a Democrat, which means he praises the common man, the farmer. He's all about agriculture, okay? And the common man is like, yeah, this is the guy for us. And so when he gets elected, he thanks them and actually invites them to the White House. You see over on the right, you've got kind of a wild party. That's his inaugural party. The story goes that he opens up the doors to anybody who wants to come. And of course, the common man shows up. Well, the common man likes to drink and dance on tables and swing from chandeliers. It's so bad that Jackson actually has to escape out a bathroom window and sleep at a friend's house the night that he's elected because the common man won't leave, right? The only way they can get them to leave is if they move the alcohol to the front yard of the White House, and when they go outside, the doors are locked behind them. It's kind of a wild story. So you might be thinking that westward expansion so far in the Louisiana Purchase is good for everyone because now more people can vote and it's cheap to own land and you can have property and all this stuff. There are a couple groups, though, that are actually hurt by westward expansion. One is the slaves. As masters buy up land in the West for more cotton production or tobacco or whatever cash crops they're growing, they only take some of their slaves, usually the strong men that they can use to build a new plantation, right? To till the ground, to build a house. What if you've got a wife and a kid back in South Carolina or Tennessee or Georgia? Well, now you're going to have to leave them. And by the way, most states said that slaves could not marry so that this wouldn't be a problem. That's a problem. The other group that's going to have significant issues is the Native Americans. Native Americans are all over the western frontier. The tribes are treated as foreign nations. So the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Creek, they're treated like nations just like England or France or Spain would be. And so we don't give them a lot of specific rights, but we do end up moving them time after time after time. Andrew Jackson in particular says, hey, we have that land out west. Why don't we take it over for white Americans? That means we got to move off the Indians. And so he does. He sends the army out to do it. And as you would imagine, some of the Native Americans are going to fight. The Seminoles in particular are going to fight to keep their land. Okay. Florida State, the Seminoles are down in Florida, right? But they're defeated, which seems like a weird choice for your mascot if they're known for being defeated. But they're also brave and they, fight valiantly. Other Native American groups like the Cherokee and the 5 civilized tribes, of which the Cherokee are one, they're actually going to assimilate. What that means is they're going to change their culture to be much more like the white man. They're going to change some of the way they dress, some of the way they speak. Some are going to convert to Christianity. They park in one place and they become farmers. Some of them go to law school. They even copy the United States Constitution to write a Constitution of the Cherokee. Everything's okay until gold is found on Cherokee lands in Georgia. And Georgia's like, yeah, it's time for you to go. We're going to take your land. And so the Cherokee appeal to the Supreme Court. They say, we know your laws. We know how this works. You can't do this to us. And believe it or not, the Supreme Court agrees with the Cherokee and says, you cannot be moved off of your land by the United States. The This is a Supreme Court case called Worcester versus Georgia. But Andrew Jackson, remember his policies are, we're going to remove the Indians. He basically says the Supreme Court has made their choice. Now let them try to enforce it, right? Like, I got the military. Let's make this happen. So he does. He sends the military to round up and move the Cherokee. He moves 16,000 of them from their home in Georgia at gunpoint to Oklahoma. And he does it right at the beginning of winter, which means a lot of these folks are going to die on the trail. 1/3 of them, like it says, die from sickness or starvation or exposure to the elements because it's cold. They get as far north as Illinois while they're marching across. This is why we call it the Trail of Tears, because it's really sad. Think about your family and how big it is. If 1 out of 3 of those people died, I would imagine you would be upset. That's the Trail of Tears. Eventually, the land in Oklahoma is going to be taken from the Native Americans. Also, it's just real bad. We don't do great for the Cherokee and the Native Americans as a whole. Guys, that is standard 2.1, or at least the first half of it. You will see another half drop later. We'll actually cover that on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. Okay? If you have any questions, shoot me an email. Otherwise, I will see you next time.